Member for Fredericton West Hanwell.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's a real pleasure to rise today, Mr. Speaker, to discuss this motion dealing with the importance of the pipeline to New Brunswick. And it's an essential issue, I think, to our economy going forward. I do, however, have some concerns about the way this government may be addressing this issue, and so please permit me to go through some of those now. Mr. Speaker, you're probably familiar with the great old quote. It's often attributed to Edmund Burke, and that is, "The only thing necessary for the triumph of evil is that good men do nothing." Now, I don't imply any evil intentions on the part of the government, Mr. Speaker, but the principle of this applies, and that is, my concern about the pipeline is that we'll have a lot of platitudes here, a lot of congratulations, a lot of agreement, but no action. Mr. Speaker, what is required from this government on this pipeline issue is real action, and I need to see that. I'm concerned that not only will we not have any action, but we may indeed suffer from straw man arguments that pop up from time to time, or even worse, that the government will seek to create those straw man arguments that will stand in the way of progress and stand in the way of this pipeline. Mr. Speaker, permit me to speak a little bit about the vision that led to this pipeline. There's a lot of Canadians that have known for a while that our landlocked oil in Alberta has got to get to salt water. And I was happy to be at the Halifax International Security Forum a few years ago where we had a meeting. That meeting was with Minister Bernard Valcourt, at that time the Minister of ACOA, and Minister Peter MacKay, the Atlantic Minister. And we met with the team from MEG Energy. And those included some visionaries and leaders such as their Senior Vice President Richard Sendall and another Senior Vice President Don Moe. And Don in particular has over 40 years of experience in the oil and gas industry. And as well, this meeting was actually facilitated by a good friend of mine, Mr. Dwayne Monnier, another member of the MEG team. And Dwayne is ever the connector, and he saw fit to bring these parties together to discuss what could help bring the pipeline east. Another key player at that meeting, Mr. Speaker, was Mr. Bill McCaffery. Now, I want to tell you a little bit, and I want to help have the members educated a little bit about Bill McCaffery. Now, Bill is the founder, president, and CEO of MEG Energy. And in fact, in 2014, he was elected the CEO of the year by a group in Alberta. Now, in 5 years, Bill has taken the production at MEG Energy, which is a relatively small Canadian oil company in Alberta. They've taken that production from 3,000 barrels a day to 30,000 barrels a day in 5 years. An incredible increase, and that is due to the leadership of Bill McCaffery. Now, Bill is a professional engineer, very experienced in the oil industry. He's a dynamic entrepreneur and a real industry leader. He's also a strategic thinker, and he knows the importance of energy security. And what I mean by that is that there is a link between energy supply and global strategic issues. And importantly, if we can get oil to places where it can go to market, that improves our energy security. And that, in fact, makes the world a more stable place. Now, Bill is, as I've said, a visionary, is a dynamic leader, and he's got a lot of projects under his wing. I mean, he's a founding member of the Halifax Canada Club, and he's invested through MEG into some pretty impressive international fellowships. So Bill is a big thinker, and he believes in paying it forward. And the result of this meeting was a discussion of the idea of the pipeline. And in fact, it's important to know that MEG Energy is one of a few oil companies that actually has what I would call vertical integration. And we're fairly familiar with that here in New Brunswick through the Irving family. But MEG has done an excellent job of vertically integrating their production with shipping and storage. So they have an actual pipeline themselves. They're actually an owner in a pipeline. They had the vision to invest in a pipeline themselves, so they know well the importance of a pipeline to the oil sector. And in fact, they've worked hard to secure capacity in pipelines in North America, and importantly, a pipeline coming east. Now, the reason this is important, Mr. Speaker, is that these people gathered together had an important vision, and that vision was shared by others, and that vision is now what we see coming to life in the Canada East Pipeline. So why is this important? What's the strategic issue behind this? Well, Mr. Speaker, it's all about the free market. And when you deal with a commodity such as oil, there's two factors. There's the commodity price itself, and there's the access to market, which then translates into a transportation cost. And the challenge with Alberta oil is that it's landlocked. It's trapped in Alberta. It doesn't have access to a coast. And so the reality is Alberta oil is sold on the market at a discount rate because it can't get itself to where the demand is. The supply doesn't meet the demand easily. So the key with Alberta oil is to find a way to get it to salt water. Because when it's on salt water, when it's coastal, it can then be sold at its true market value. It achieves a true market rate. And Mr. Speaker, this is somewhere in the range of up to 60% of the value of the oil. It is a considerable portion that Alberta oil is being discounted because it can't get shipped easily to world markets. So that's great for Alberta. If we can get Alberta oil to salt water, the price and the value of that oil goes up and there's more revenue flowing into Alberta. That's great for Alberta. But why is that important for New Brunswick? Well, first of all, let's all face the reality, and that is many of the services that are provided here in New Brunswick are funded from federal transfer payments. It's a great component of our Constitution that we balance across our country the economies that exist, and so the stronger provinces help out the provinces that are struggling. At this point in time, New Brunswick is a have-not province, and we receive transfer payments. I'm looking forward to the day, Mr. Speaker, that through this pipeline and through responsible development of our natural resources and the elimination of the moratorium this government wants to put on natural gas development, I'm looking forward to the day that New Brunswick can be a half province. But we're not there yet. So, Mr. Speaker, as I said, it's great for Alberta if we can get their oil to salt water, but it's also good for us. Number one, because they're paying our bills. That's the reality. Right now they're paying our bills, and the more money they have, the more money that's available to flow to pay our bills. Not the way I like it, but it is the reality. Secondly, on top of their transfer payments, that economic energy in Alberta contributes to the tax base, the Canadian tax base, which once again helps to pay for federal institutions here in the province of New Brunswick. And the other unfortunate reality, Mr. Speaker, is that many New Brunswickers who want to develop their skills and seek employment, they go to Alberta. And I've known personally, in fact, most of the young people that I've known here in Fredericton have ultimately ended up in Alberta or been there for a time. Some of those people go and stay there, but there is a significant portion of our population, as I'm sure you're aware, Mr. Speaker, of commuters, people that get on a plane and fly out to Alberta, work a week, a month, and then come home here to their families. And they could still be residents in New Brunswick. In fact, most of them pay taxes here in New Brunswick. They raise their children here. They own homes here. So they're still an important part of our economy, but the jobs, unfortunately, right now are in Alberta. All that to say, the growth in Alberta actually ends up affecting us fairly directly. But then, of course, there's the fact that a better, stronger Alberta is an economic engine in this country. And that economic energy, that economic activity that's happening in Alberta as a result of oil has a trickle-down to New Brunswick. There are indirect jobs. We have suppliers that supply the oil fields. We have lots of the secondary and tertiary supply chain pieces that go and equip and help service the oil fields in Alberta. So there is some direct and indirect spin-off to New Brunswick. So that's why it's good for New Brunswick that Alberta oil goes coastal. But what is the benefit here in New Brunswick of the pipeline? Well, there again, Mr. Speaker, we have both direct and indirect benefits. First of all, there are jobs. There are jobs that are going to come here to this province to build that pipeline. There's no doubt. There's direct jobs on the pipeline. There's jobs in preparing the way, in providing the foundation, all those direct jobs on the pipeline. Now, no doubt, Mr. Speaker, there are experts that will come to this province to help build that pipeline. We don't have all of the expertise that we need to build pipelines here in New Brunswick, but there will be a lot of jobs for New Brunswickers, and hopefully we can attract back some of those people that went away to work in this industry in the first place. But in addition to those, there's going to be a boom with the construction of the pipeline, no doubt. But there's also ongoing maintenance for the pipeline, and those are long-term, enduring jobs here in the province of New Brunswick. And there's not thousands of those jobs, Mr. Speaker, but those are good, well-paying jobs for New Brunswickers here in New Brunswick. And as well, there are indirect jobs. There's second-line support, as I've mentioned for parts and all the different pieces that need to go together to make a pipeline. A lot of that can be provided by New Brunswick companies, and I implore the government to put in place some sort of mechanism to make sure that we receive an industrial benefit here in New Brunswick. Of course, if you look at national procurement in Canada, there is always an industrial benefit piece that's provided to the country if we buy foreign. And similarly, I encourage the government to adopt some sort of mechanism here in New Brunswick to ensure that New Brunswick workers and New Brunswick companies benefit directly from this economic activity. But even if they fail to do that, Mr. Speaker, there's no doubt that the economic activity of building a pipeline here in the province of New Brunswick and maintaining it is going to be good for this province. And as well, there's all kinds of other spin-off work. There's legal work, there's surveying, there's the income to hotels and restaurants and general economic stimulus. All of this is important to the province, and a lot of it will happen in our ridings, right in rural areas in this province, where we need that kind of economic activity the most. So that's very important. So, Mr. Speaker, that's a brief outline of how the direct and indirect jobs from Alberta oil moving through New Brunswick are going to benefit New Brunswick. But it's more than just that, Mr. Speaker. We have indeed the incredible economic benefit to the Port of St. John. And, of course, I'm a Fredericton area MLA, so my first responsibility is here in Fredericton. But to me, there is no doubt that what is good for St. John is good for New Brunswick, and what is good for New Brunswick is good for Fredericton. So, Mr. Speaker, even if that Alberta oil only flows through this province and gets on a ship at the Port of St. John and goes off to a world market, there are definite direct benefits to this province. Benefits that will not be seen if we do not have the pipeline. This is an economic boon. But even more than that, even more than those benefits, I would say the most important part of the pipeline, the Canada East Pipeline, is the continued and guaranteed supply to the refinery in St. John. Mr. Speaker, that refinery itself accounts for a tremendous percentage of the exports of this province. It's the largest refinery in Canada, and one of the only ones now on the eastern seaboard of Canada. I think perhaps the only one, and incredibly modern, a great facility. And Mr. Speaker, what that facility needs is a constant supply of oil. Just like any engine, you've got to keep putting the oil in to get the output. And if we don't have a constant, guaranteed supply of oil for that refinery may face shutdowns, it may face work slows, and might ultimately not be viable and have to be closed. But with a dedicated supply of oil, Mr. Speaker, the future of that pipeline is guaranteed. And that is very good for this province. So, Mr. Speaker, one crucial thing that people need to understand about this pipeline is it is not publicly funded. This is a private enterprise. This pipeline will not cost the taxpayers of this province or the taxpayers of this country one nickel. This pipeline will be funded entirely by private support. And I'll tell you, one of the other people that has earned my respect on this issue is Member of Parliament John Williamson, the Member of Parliament for New Brunswick Southwest. He was out early advocating on this. And he was very clear that it wasn't going to be a government project, that it was going to be a private project. And I appreciate his leadership on this file. But it's important to note that the role of government does have a role. It's not to fund this project, but it is to get out of the way, Mr. Speaker. So I go back to my earlier statement, and that is my concern about the Liberal approach to this project is that it cuts against their grain. I'm concerned because when the federal leader came here, Mr. Trudeau, he showed his true colors. At his core, he detests this kind of stuff. He's not a fan of heavy industrial activity. He doesn't realize the importance. And I'm afraid that he would use any excuse to stop it. Now, Mr. Trudeau's a smart guy, and he's smart enough not to act, so we're never going to see him acting against the pipeline. But my concern is that a Liberal government, either provincially or federally, will err by omission. And they will block, delay, question, and hold up this pipeline. Mr. Speaker, what we need from this government is not more resolutions, not more platitudes, not more amendments to resolutions. What we need is a government that is going to push for this pipeline, that is going to encourage this pipeline and facilitate it at every turn to ensure that inaction does not stand in the way of progress. Mr. Speaker, I encourage the government to support this resolution, and more than that, to take real action to ensure that this pipeline goes through to bring Alberta oil to the shore. Thank you very much.
Member for Victoria Leveille.
Thank you, Mr.